Well, hello and welcome to the ASCENT podcast. My name is Brian, and I have a wonderful panel with me today. And we're going to get into talking about show up to give, not to get. And that's a very interesting topic. And we're going to first start by kind of just going around and asking each one of our members here on the panel, when you hear that term, show up to give, not to get, what does that mean to you? What impression does it give you when you hear that? And we'll start with our special guest today, Trisina. How about you share what that means to you when you hear someone say that?
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
For me, showing up to give and not to get just means, uh, I think I would say it this way, servant leadership, right? Where you're serving others and there's no expectation in return of what they're going to give you back.
Okay. Okay. Bridget, what about you?
And my answer is pretty much the same as Tracina's. Good morning, everybody. Just showing up to give, showing up to be of service, and not
Mhm.
having a motive to what I'm going to get in return or what my expectation is to get in return.
Mhm. So and I think the key word here there, Bridget, was expectation, right? And
Mhm.
getting what you get back. And I think that's a key component. We'll certainly get into that a little bit more. I agree with that too. What's a little bit different from me is I also look at it from the standpoint of almost like a balance sheet, and that is deposits versus withdrawals, right? And again, just like everything else in life, people say things should be 50-50, and that's also like perfection does not exist. It's never going to be perfectly balanced like that. But I look
Mhm.
at it from the standpoint of how much time are you spending, how much effort are you putting in to deposit into someone, into other situations, versus just taking or withdrawing from those situations, and being conscious and aware of that fact of what your balance sheet looks like from a depositing versus withdrawing standpoint. And
Right.
one of the key areas that I think that we do that in sometimes and don't realize is, especially in individual relationships, is emotional support.
Mhm.
Emotionally, how are you showing up to deposit into someone to support them versus taking away from someone and having them just feed what you need? Because there's two different sides to that. What comments do you have on that?
And I think with that, you have to be really intentional because sometimes you can have friends that you have just been so used to that person. You're venting to that person a lot.
Mhm.
You're calling them with your with concerns. You're asking them to help you figure something out. And sometimes we get caught up in that person because that person may be the stronger person, right? And
Mhm.
so we never. Sometimes we won't think, well, person might need us as well. And so you
Mhm.
have to really be intentional with, okay, I have this person that I always talk to and I always call, but now I need to be intentional about, hey, so how's your day? Like, what is it that you need? And sometimes we get caught up in our own stuff and we forget that, especially when we're talking about the strong friend. And I
Mhm.
always talk about that person because sometimes I'm that person, and I know Tracina feels the same because she was a strong person for me in the past. So now I'm really into, and I wasn't always intentional about that, and I think that was very selfish. But when we get caught up in everything that's going on with us, we sometimes forget that the person that we're leaning on, or the person that we're getting and we're getting from, we need to deposit into them as well.
Mhm. Absolutely, 100%. Trisina, what thoughts do you have on that?
When I think about the emotional aspect of showing up as a giver, I don't, when you follow with the no expectations, if you're giving, you have to make sure that your emotional state, and Brian, I like that balance sheet, is in a place where you can give. Because emotionally, if someone is coming to you, uh, especially if you're serving them in a capacity such as nonprofit work or in ministry, you need to have your emotions in check, because if not, what they're coming to get from you, then you'll have an expectation. Well, you're asking me to do this, but I need this or I need that. So I think the emotional component of showing up to give is that what I'm going to offer you is that I can sit in that space where you need something from me. And emotionally, I can filter through whatever it is you're showing me,
Mhm.
so that there's no expectation that if there's something you say that triggers me or it triggers something that I may have experienced, that it doesn't pull something out of me, that then I'm expecting something from either the experience, the encounter, or you, the person that actually was showing up to get something.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I want to go
Yeah.
back to, thank you, Tristina. I want to go back to something Bridget brought up there when she was talking about, that rock, that strong person that you have.
Mhm.
So in your mind, have this sense that they don't need that, because they're always that rock and that solid person. And that's so not true, right? Just because they
Mhm.
have that personality and that personality trait of being kind of the guy and the rock and the person people tend to lean on, that doesn't mean that they don't have a need to feel supported, to feel heard, and that type thing. So that's another area I think we need to really be conscious of and open our eyes to and say, I don't do a good job of that with this person because they're my rock. So all I do is lean
Mhm.
on them. But every now and then you need to give them that chance to be able to lean back, right? And be
Yeah.
open to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would like to add, Bridget mentioned that I was that strong friend for her. And we do sometimes see those who are strong as not needing it. And in a discipleship, y'all know I'm in ministry, so I'll pull some of that in just because of the experience. But I had a person in our discipleship group that said, "Well, you seem like you're so strong and you don't never need anything. So when you do have a need, no one knows." And I think there is in this give and take, as far as giving and getting, we have to remember that we are all the same. And so if there's a season of your life where you need to be able to go to someone else, just remember there's going to be a season in that person's life who may be the strong friend or someone you can always go to that they need. And I think what we need to do is just start showing up and saying, "Hey, how are you today? And is there anything you need from me?" And I think those who are always comfortable with getting from their quote unquote strong friends, that's not something they stop and consider.
Correct.
That maybe I need to ask her, "What is it that you need?" Or ask him, "Hey, how can I show up for you today in the way that you've shown up for me?"
Mhm.
And, for me personally, I don't want to seem like, you know, I'm putting all my stuff in places where people usually come to ask me to, either support them, encourage them. So I just always keep that balance and just, I don't know. That's an area of growth for me. I don't know how to transition into that other person where I need to say, "Hey, today is not a good day for me to be giving out. I need to receive."
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
I think
I wasn't well, in serving others now in the capacity of a nonprofit,
Yeah.
and even my volunteers come to me, and I'm thinking in my head when they're coming to me, okay, somebody, I need somebody, too.
Mhm.
So it is hard to be, to say, hey, I'm not really feeling this right now. Can you ask me how I'm doing first or whatever? So I'll just let it build up. And that's what I'm working on.
Mhm.
That's personal growth
Yeah.
for me. It's working
Yeah.
on being able to say, hey, I can't. And I've been practicing no for some months now. It feels really good. But I know it's Bay. But
mhm.
I still have to be very conscious of, reminding other people that lean on me, hey, I need you to sometimes ask me how I'm
Yeah.
doing, or and reminding them without being sarcastic or offending them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the
Yeah.
other piece of it too, I think, is we get into it with it's time and energy, right? Because it does take
Mhm.
some actual effort and it takes some of your energy to be that person who's open and receiving so that people can interact with you and you're not just again, and Bridget, I know one of the sessions we did recently, you kind of use this term like they're almost like an emotional vampire, right? They're just sucking everything out of everybody
Mhm.
else, but that type of situation, and that can be emotionally draining. That's
Mhm.
your time, your energy, and whatever else you have. So understanding that there needs to really be some kind of balance around
That's
that
right.
Hmm.
is, I think, a very key component to be aware of.
Right, right. Because the lines can get crossed, and self awareness has a lot to do with that. And you can come in and give without expecting to get. Um,
Mhm.
when your heart, when it's a heart thing for me.
Mhm, mhm.
I'm going to go in here and I know this is what I come to do. But in actuality, you do get, when you serve, you
Mm-hmm.
do get, and I think we'll go into
Yeah.
that later on, but you do receive,
Yep.
even though you don't know that you will, or that you don't have intentions of doing that, you will receive if
Right.
your heart
Yeah.
is open.
And that's the key component, and I wanna get into that a little bit now because I'm glad you brought that up. Um, Receiving gets, I think, confused in some ways because it's this thing or this thought that it has to be a tangible thing when that you
Mhm.
receive, and it's not always that. It's not always going to be a tangible thing that you receive. So understanding that, and then also when you receive, it might be something that you deposit today, but that withdrawal that you get to do might be
Mhm.
5 years from now. That's related to that. So
Absolutely.
it's not this instant gratification, which is the world we live in today, and people want it
Yeah.
instantly, right? And understanding that too is that how you receive and what you receive very well might not be a tangible thing, and it might not happen for a period of time is a key component to it also.
I agree.
So, what about this? One of the things that I always look at and talk about when we're receiving, because immediately I think a lot of people might have saw the topic and go, "Well, I volunteer to do this at the holidays, or I volunteer to do that." And not to say that that's not important, but that's not really the gist of what we're saying here, because it's a little bit
Mhm.
different. It's not because volunteering obviously matters, and that is your way of giving back. And so when you say give versus getting, I'm volunteering, therefore I'm taking care of or I'm feeding that particular thing. But what we're talking about is definitely more at that emotional level, that spiritual level, that one-to-one understanding of other individuals, and that piece of the give versus get is I think more what our focus is today. Not to say that we're not also talking about the volunteerism that you may do, but
Hmm.
that's I think part of the bigger picture than the micro picture that we're really focused on today.
And so, and then I pose a question to you guys and to the audience as well. Sometimes when we're in relationships, whether it be intimate relationships, family relationships, we do give because that's who we are. We're givers.
Mhm.
But how do you draw a line? Because sometimes we give until we don't have any more left to give, and then we start wanting to receive. How do you keep that balance? How do you keep
Mhm.
that balance when you're the person, the strong person in the family, or when people just know you're going to give, so they don't even ask for it, they just mention the need, and they know
Yeah.
you're going to jump in there and give it. And so, how do you balance that, and so you won't be pouring from an empty cup? So
Mm.
how do you do that? So audience, how do you do that? And I'm asking you guys as well. How do you do that? How do you draw that line?
Tristina, what do you think?
Uh, well, I'll tell you, in this season of life, it is a challenge.
Mhm.
I'm learning how to have boundaries. And in one particular area, it's as a mom, as mothers, that's what we do. We give, right? We give for the benefit of our kids and what they need in different ages and stages. And so I have my 27-year-old who is back home. And so learning how to have that balance of I can't always give to you and the things that she needs because I got these other little ones that I'm still raising, right? They're much younger. And so I'm learning how to balance that, having the need to be a mom to my younger ones and then still navigating what parenting an adult child looks like who has moved back home.
Hmm.
So that's been tough. I mean,
Mhm.
emotionally, it's been tough because y'all, sometimes I pull up in my garage and I sit there. I'm like, before I can even go in the house,
That's a
and these,
thing. That's a thing.
yeah,
Sitting in your car for a while is a thing for real.
yeah. And so I've had to take those moments so that I can gather myself because especially when you serve in community and you're going into the community, of course, to give. And then as soon as you make it home, it's like they're taking. And that's what we know is okay, right? For our children. But I have a 27-year-old adult. And so I'm having to tell her, no, honey, you got to do that. But then in the other aspect of just life in general is when you're a giver, you have to be intentional on what your limits are going to be. You have to set boundaries. And I think just in who I am as a person, I've learned through the years um, that I am a giver. I do show up in those places, but I've learned from having moments of exhaustion and feeling that I wasn't appreciated in the way that I showed up to give. You got to set boundaries because those who are looking to get will always be willing to seek out the givers, right?
Absolutely.
And so having boundaries is important, Bridget, and it's something I'm still learning, right? How to navigate it, because I don't want my oldest to feel like I'm pushing her aside, because no matter how old they get, kids still need their parents in some aspect. But learning how to balance that with her being back home, but then in life period, just realizing, and those that you serve, and there are some people, because my number is public, working in the community, that sometimes the phone calls and texts come in late, and can you do this and can you do that? So I'm like, where's your boundaries? And
Right.
stick to your boundaries.
Stick to
So
the boundaries.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So I'm gonna go back to Bridget's original question there, and one of the things that kind of came out of that, I think, is self care, right?
Mm.
Because you talk about you pull into the garage and you're like, okay, I need a minute, right?
Yep.
And I've heard Bridget say that before about when she first gets to school in the morning. Sometimes that's what she has to do, is actually sit there in the car for a moment,
Hmm.
uh, and then kind of go, okay, I'm ready for this, right? And so that's all part of that self-care piece that, again, it's a lot of awareness that goes around that, to know when
Hmm.
your cup is getting empty, when you need to be recharged, and then making sure that you find the time, the place, or the people who do that
Yeah.
for you, uh,
Mm.
Yeah.
is a key component to it. So, but I think the thing too is you have to be aware of when what it takes, who those people are, where those places are,
Hmm.
and then the main piece of that from there on out is time. Where do you find the time? Dedicating
Yeah.
the time, scheduling the time. And I know Bridget will definitely talk about that piece of it, because that's one thing that I know she does quite a bit of, is she actually
Mhm.
schedules some time for some very specific things.
Yeah, and you have to be intentional. I'm gonna tell you, I used to be all over the place with my. I think when I met Tristina, I was just all over the place. Just like, young kids, older kids, grandkids, and want to do this and teaching and want to do organization, just all over the place. And I didn't have any rhyme or a reason or any scheme to what was first.
Mhm.
And so I will be very transparent in saying it took me up until probably the end part of last year to really get it all organized, because I still was not saying no. And Brian can attest to, I was emotionally involved in everybody's stuff on my own. They
Yes.
kind of put the fishing pole out there, and they didn't really lift it up. I just kept climbing up on the fishing pole. Just let me in, let me help. And so I had to, like, okay, stop, because I
Yeah.
was, at a point where you talked about, Tristina, where you just exhausted. So I had to plan out my giving. And a lot of it at first was back to myself. I was
Yeah.
giving to myself, and may have appeared kind of selfish, but that was the only way I can start sorting out my giving to other people.
Mhm.
I had to kind of pour back into me for a little bit. And I know we'll talk about that as well. But I didn't ever want to stop being a giving person. As
Mhm.
Brian said, you have to be intentional about self-care, and intentional about, your giving season, and intentional about who you can get from, like who can you replenish, who can you go to replenish what you need. And that's what I had to kind of sort out. And this worked for me. Like, my hands are still no shaking. I always say, let me see how I feel today.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it works for me. And it's not favorable amongst the people that care, or say they care about me, or appear to care about me. Some people, it wasn't a good thing for me to do, but it helped my peace, and
Mm.
I still can be
Yeah.
peaceful in giving. And what you said about boundaries, I still can be peaceful in giving and still have boundaries.
Hmm.
And then, what I've done the last 3 months, I've been in my teach people how to treat me season.
Mhm.
And so that has allowed me to give without in a peaceful manner. I'll say that.
Say a little bit more about that, because I when you think about this from a giving versus getting, but then you say teach people how to treat you. So if you are then giving, you are teaching them how to give, right?
How to
So
give.
Mm,
And
yeah.
sometimes we don't want to make mention to people because we don't want people to seem like, oh, she's only doing this for me, so I can do this for her.
right.
Mhm.
But to the people that we know are getting more from us and they're giving, we have to teach them because they may not know. I need that from you. Okay,
Mhm.
hey, I know you always call me with this, that, and the other, and I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna listen to you on the phone the whole 30 minutes,
Mhm.
talk.
Mhm.
But I'm gonna tell you, hey, so I'm gonna give you what I think you're saying, and if you tell me if you want my opinion or do you want me to just listen, that's fine. But I need you to be there for me as well. And it was like I didn't know how to tell people that without feeling like, oh, they're gonna think I'm saying they don't never do. We talk ourselves out of it. With that stinking thinking, what I
Mhm.
say, we talk ourselves out of teaching people how we want to be treated. And so since I'm a giver and I'm never going to stop being that person, then I may as well start teaching people how to treat me in the giving.
It makes perfect sense to me. So let me ask this question. As part of that and a follow up to that, what about assumptions and assuming that the other person gets it, knows it, understands it, knows what you need,
Mhm.
that whole 9 yards? And that's from both sides, right? That's the giver and the person also
Mhm.
that's receiving. Um, what do you say about assumptions and how that can play into the dynamics of whatever the relationship may be?
Trusina.
I've learned the best thing you can do is communicate,
Mm,
right? Because much of my life has been serving other people professionally and personally. And I'm very fulfilled in what I do, as a mom, as a minister. And so what I've learned though is you have to communicate, because for some of us, being a giver, like that part of who we are, that is not something everybody really has tapped into. I don't want to say everyone doesn't have that capacity or that ability, but they haven't tapped into it, right?
mhm,
So they may be just takers, or those looking to get, but you have to communicate that. So when my kids are constantly, and I'll speak to the parent part, are wanting this and that, I have to tell them there is 5 of you and there's 1 of me. Whether it's phone calls, texts, mom, can you do this? Mom, can you do that? There is 5 of you and there's 1 of me. Who
mhm,
else can come and do that very thing that you're asking me to do? Because right now I'm not going to do it. Right? I just don't have the ability to stop and make changes, and there's flexibility. We've learned that as parents, but you have to communicate that, because if you don't, then what happens is then you find that there's issues, right? Someone is upset or angry and they feel like, well, you didn't do this and that. And it's because I didn't communicate. So I've just learned the best way you can do that, you have to communicate to those who are coming to you to get from you. And then, even as a giver, what are you communicating to the other person that I'm
mhm,
willing to give in this
mhm.
moment, or in this relationship? So communication is key.
Yeah.
I
100%.
definitely agree with you. I'm sorry, Brian. You want to
No,
say
go
something?
ahead. No, go ahead.
I spent most of my life assuming, right?
Mm,
Assuming that people understood when I gave, that, I wanted something, I wanted to feel the way I'm
mm,
making you feel. I want to get what I'm giving. I want to be served. And not making it about being a parent, but that teaches you, if once you think about parenthood, it teaches you so many life lessons that don't even have to do with
yep.
parenthood. But when I'm now that I have grown children,
Mhm.
I assumed because you're grown now, you should know that your mom feels this kind of way when you're not, giving, or when you're receiving but not giving back. Your mom feels this kind of way when your mom feels, and they don't. I mean, some people
Mhm.
just don't get it. And so, like you said, communication is key, because I assumed that, the girls that I served, that they understood that Miss Bridget sometimes wants, just common courtesy. Some people don't know
Mhm.
that. And so you do have to
Yeah.
communicate that. I like to feel appreciated sometimes, guys, when I do this, or, say thank you, or even with my kids, I, I'm going to tell you, kids not calling you back is a thing too. And so, call me back if I call you, because if you call me and I don't answer, then you sending out the police department or whatever, because I missed you. So, treat me the way I'm treating you, but I didn't communicate that before. I just assumed you knew. I just assumed everybody
Yeah.
knows, because I know. And so that's where the teaching part comes in, and definitely the communicating that comes in as well.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is something that I learned too, and as they said, whether it's parenting or career or whatever else it might be, is setting the expectation. That's all part of the communication circle,
Mhm.
right? Setting that expectation of what it is that you need, desire, uh, and being clear with the different relationships in your life too, because the expectations you have with children is going to be different from your personal siblings, for example,
Mhm.
versus your closest friends
Mhm.
versus your coworkers. So there's different levels and different tiers that you also have to understand. And again, you have to sort that out for self as to what you need, how you need it, and what needs to be balanced from a giving and getting and deposits and withdrawals and emotionally and so on
Mhm.
and so on, from all these different levels and types of relationships. And that's a key piece of it,
Yeah.
to kind of be able to sort that out. Uh, but the key too is not only to get it sorted out, but then to know how to then manage it as you move forward, whether it's a
Mhm.
self-care piece
Mhm.
of it. And then dynamics of relationships also change, right?
Right.
How
Mhm.
and Tristina, you have 5 kids, right? How you relate it to a 12-year-old versus a 17-year-old versus a 25-year-old.
Mhm.
Same
Yeah.
child, but a different child at a different
Yeah.
stage in life. So
That's right.
working your way through that piece of it is a big part as well.
Right. Right.
Um, so let's look at this too from a obviously we've kind of talked a little bit on the outskirts of volunteerism and that piece of it. And I think that's also a key piece because I believe at in some level and at some way we all have, and I'm going to use the term, a responsibility. And
Mhm.
it's my thought, so I get to own one, right? So that's my thought, to do what we can to make the world a better place, right?
Yeah.
And so I think part of that circle is giving, right? And so there are many different ways that you can do that through volunteerism or even a platform like this, or what Bridge is doing with mentoring the teenage
Mhm.
girls that she mentors, and Christina, the things that you've done. What was your motivation? Is the question I have for you to start down that pathway. Um, and obviously, there's two sides to that coin. One side of it is the greater good, but then the other side of it is what was in it for you. So I'd like to hear what you
Mhm.
have to say about that.
Well, you both know my story, and so starting a mentor program was not what was my first idea, but I really wanted to do outreach, just kind of giving knowledge to the community as far as teens, the things that I thought they needed to know about the community, helping. It was mostly serving, right? I didn't really think
Mhm.
about just catering to teenage girls. And me and Trisina talked years ago about that, and that's where it came from. But I can't even say I went into it wanting to get anything, because I had so many experiences as a teen, and so many experiences as a young mother, that I just want to share it with them,
Mhm.
so that in some hope they would not take some of those detours that I had to take. And then some of them were great. Some of my journeys that, detours were for my greater good. So I didn't even know if I
Mhm.
was trying to get something out of it. I just want to see people, empower people based on my experiences. And maybe
Mhm.
that's what I was trying to get, to see other
Mhm.
people empowered based on my experiences. Um, so when I went into it, it was just to empower other young women and and teenage girls, and so that they can make different decisions. And because I wish I would have had a me when I was a teenager.
Mhm.
I had a parent, I had parents, but I didn't have a me. And that's not patting myself on the back. But sometimes, even now, when I talk and do topics, I always say, sometimes I say, wow, Bridget, I wish somebody would have told me that.
Mhm.
And even people
Yeah.
have said, parents have said, thank you for telling my daughter that or whatever. And I wish somebody would have told me that. And I'm like, same. I wish somebody would have told me that too. So I went into it to serve, and I didn't expect to get back, but just moving forward, the getting back that I get, the getting back is so much bigger and larger than what I give. Because I
Mhm.
walk
Mhm.
away thinking, wow. I go into the shelters, homeless shelters here in Houston, and talk with teen girls. And I walk away feeling empowered, because they teach me that in any situation, in any environment, they can still be themselves, and they can still be who they were created to be, and they still want to. They
Yeah.
still want to. And I can't imagine being a teenage girl living in a homeless shelter with my mom and my brother and still having dreams, right?
Mhm.
So they empower me. I walk away with that. But at the beginning, I didn't know if I was trying to get anything. I was just trying to share
Mm.
what had happened to me, and what to, and just give them my newness, because I couldn't go to them from an empty place. So once I
Mhm.
was like, all these things that I felt like I missed out on, or all the areas of my life that was broken, that was healed, once it was restored, I feel like I can give that to others. So that's what I did. That was my point.
Awesome, awesome. That's good to hear, and it's one of those things where we're out and we have the opportunities to have an impact and to make a difference, uh, and a lot of times you don't know what you don't know, right? You enter it
Yeah.
thinking one thing, and it ended up being something a little bit different. Tristina, what about you? Your journey and to start down the road where you are now and giving back and being engaged in the community. What were your initial thoughts as to why you wanted to do it from a serving standpoint, but then also what was some of the things that maybe you thought it would feed back to you?
Well, the story is very similar to Bridget's. As a child growing up, there were certain things you just didn't get. And then as I got older and began working in education, I realized there's a whole lot of children that have different circumstances, but the same experience of there's just certain things I'm not getting from, my home or my community. And so the last 5 years of being an educator, a public school teacher, I realized that there's more that our communities need. And my heart, I guess, through the journey, my own personal story, and going through those challenging times, I realized that, you know what, we need to show up for others.
Mm,
And the things that I didn't get, I want to make sure that others. And so my heart through all of that didn't become hardened. It was even more tender towards those and compassionate and understanding. And so those years I spent, the last years in education, I was like, there's a lot of work to do. And while I may not be in the classroom, I still can connect with my community and find ways to serve. And then when I left the classroom, there was an opportunity for me to enter full-time ministry. And so that's another level of service. And what I learned is in life general, not all of us get what it is we need in the journey in our life's journey. And so there are those, I believe the Lord has tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, you're it. I'm calling you into a life of service. What am I looking to get? Honestly, it's not anything personal, but to see that whatever a person needed, they were able to get it because I was in proximity and I was there to show up.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just a smile, maybe it's just a hug if they're having a moment, and maybe it's just a listening ear, right? So in any capacity that I'm serving, it really is about making sure that that person is getting what they need. And I'll tell you, in a very dark season of my own life, I'm scrolling through my phone, right? I dropped my kids off at school and life is just tough. I'm scrolling through my phone. I probably had 200 contacts, but I didn't feel like there was anyone that would really be able to carry the weight of my hurt, of my brokenness. And so that is why I show up for others, because I don't believe we should ever do life alone. But to have 200 people in your or phone in your contacts, but not have anyone that can be there, I was like, I definitely don't want somebody else going through that. So
Mm.
now, the blessing in ministry is you get to do that
Mm-hmm.
and serve other people. And the fulfillment is that a life has been changed. It's
Mm-hmm.
been
Mm.
impacted by your service.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
powerful, especially when you think about, like you said, you've got 200 friends or 200 people in your phone. It's like
Yeah.
social media as well. And social
Yeah.
media is what it is. We're on it right now. So I can't hammer it to death. But yeah, I have
Right.
5,000 followers. But do you have, of those 5,000 people, who can
Yeah.
you lean on in those times? Just like you described, and that can understand you and the pain, the hurt, the situation that you may be in. So
Yeah.
that's a key component, and that's the note that I actually made right here, which is very interesting because, and it says, get tuned in,
Mm.
and I think that's a key part of it too. Is yes, we all have busy lives and families, careers, all of these various things are swirling around us all the time. However, that doesn't mean that you can't take some of that mental capacity, some of the time, the energy, and make some effort to get tuned in to those in your life, to the environment around you, to see where you can start to quote unquote give, to make a difference, to
That's
get
right.
engaged. Um, but if you just, blinders on, tunnel vision, doing your thing, uh, you're not tuned in to really what's going on around you. And so that's one of the things I wanted to bring to the table to say, even this platform for me is my way of getting it out of my thinking, out of my head, out of my heart, my spirit, wherever it might be, and putting it out there in the world. It may resonate with us some, it may not resonate with others, but the whole point is I've chosen to try to get tuned in and to at
Yeah.
least put it out there in an attempt to make a difference. So that's what I would challenge others to do, is to really get those blinders off and hey, look, get your head up, look around and go, wow, this person's going through this, or I get the sense that this is happening there. You know what? I can
That's right.
get engaged there and I can make a difference
Mm-hmm.
and take the initiative to start to do those things without
That's
being
right.
prompted, without expecting something in return, all of
That's
those
right.
different pieces and parts of it.
And a lot of
That's
times people will let their past experiences with other people prevent them from being a giver.
Mm,
Or
right.
they feel like, well, I can only do this, but, and comparing what the gift that they have to other gifts that other people have.
Yeah.
I can only
That's
do
right.
this. So I don't think nobody's going to really need that. But I'm going to tell you what I've learned is the giver always gets. I mean, it
mm,
may not be the same weight as what you gave, but you're going to always, you're never going to go without. Somebody needs you, right? And so somebody's gonna
Mhm.
show you that they need you, and you're gonna
mm,
always get, whether it's self-sacrifice, I mean self-fulfillment, or whether it's someone actually showing you that they appreciate it. And I used to, and I'm very transparent, as I said before, about how I used to think, and that's probably why I have so many great stories. I'm going to call them great because for me, they are great
Mhm.
stories because I didn't think I could give back, and then I was going by
Mhm.
numbers. Y'all know that about me. I was always thinking about how many number of girls, and if it wasn't a large group, then I wasn't effective, or but I learned that it just reaching one, like Brian said, just reaching one
That's
person.
right.
If one person looked at this podcast today and was
mm,
helped,
Mhm.
then the mission, the goal was achieved. Um, so don't let your past experiences of giving talk you out of giving because
Yes.
you were hurt. Because, like Tristina said, even in the brokenness, she still pushed forward because you were hurt. So I'm not going to be like that anymore because they're just going to use me.
Mhm.
Even in relationships, women tend to be like, well, I'm not going to trust anybody else anymore. I'm not
Mhm.
going to give my heart. I'm not going to give my love. Or even with children, with our children and our friendships, well, I just don't. I hear a lot of women say, I don't have any women friends because I get along better with men. I just like, that makes no sense. We need each other.
Mhm.
So don't let your past experiences keep you from being a giver, especially if God has God has given us all a serving heart. Now, whether we
Mhm.
Yeah.
use it or not is our own personal reasons for not. But don't let it be because you were hurt before, or
Mhm.
I'm not giving
Yeah.
because I don't ever get anything back. Really think about what happened when you gave and what you walked away from. Just if you walked away with being appreciative that you could help someone, because it's always going to be somebody less fortunate. I know that's cliche.
Mhm.
It's always somebody less fortunate than you. But there are people that are in worse situations that you're in, and to be able to reach back and pull somebody up from that because you've been there. To me, is the get itself. That's my
Yeah.
get. That's what I get, is to know that I was able. And like Tristina said, God is like, okay, you're the one. I'm gonna pick you. We all have an individual purpose here on earth, and whether you found your
Mhm.
purpose now or not, it is to serve.
Mhm.
Narrow it
Absolutely.
all the way down to the end. If you get to the bottom of it, it's going to be to serve in some
Mhm.
capacity, and that's why
Yeah.
we were put on this earth, is to serve. So I just wanted to say that while it was on my mind. Don't let past experiences, or don't let hurts or neglect or assumptions
Mhm.
being a giver, because we were all put here to give.
Give. Absolutely. Bridget, while I want to go back to something that kind of resonated with me too. You were talking about being in the homeless shelters, and having that interaction and that type thing. I think another piece of giving and one of the benefits of definitely being a giver and getting engaged is it makes you truly appreciate the things you do have in your life,
Mhm.
right? Because it shines a light that you can't even imagine until you're in those moments. Can you kind of maybe tell a story or share maybe an experience that you had personally from that?
And I talk to my girls about this because in Houston I go to homeless shelters, but in Nacogdoches I have actual girls that I mentor, and some of them are in college, in different parts of Texas now, but I still have that communication, and I tell them the experiences. And I'm at a homeless shelter, and I'm talking about something like, just like getting a hamburger, right? And I'm having a
Mhm.
conversation with the youth worker there, and I said, oh, that she was talking about lunch, and I said, oh, I want a hamburger, but I want a homemade one. I don't want to go buy one. And one of the girls said, that must be nice to be able to make a hamburger at your house.
Mhm.
I didn't even realize that they didn't have a stove in there, because where the house in most shelters they have like a mini fridge, but they don't
Mhm.
give them like a stove or anything that they can fix food because of safety, right?
Mm.
So you have to
Mhm.
go to the community kitchen to cook your own meals. If you want to cook, if you have time, or if you can cook for your family, you have to go to the community room and cook for your family. So something like making a hamburger, so simple, right? I didn't realize that they can't even do that. And so we started to talk about, at that moment, that was a time, that was a teaching moment. Let's talk about how
Mhm.
that feels and how to process that. But I didn't even think about they couldn't make a hamburger. So something simple as that. And I tell my kids, my mentees, you don't know how good it is for you
Mhm.
to be able to go to the kitchen and make noodles, or you don't have hamburgers or whatever you want to make, but you have something. And some kids
Mm.
can't even go into a kitchen, open the refrigerator up, and then start cooking food. They
Mhm.
gotta write down a time where they can go in the kitchen. Their parent has to be there. Just going through that process, it makes you it's so humbling. Like I've always said,
Mhm.
just
Mm.
walking away from there, And then knowing that they want to talk about stuff like boys and girls and making charm bracelets and just normal teenage stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I don't know if I would be in the right mindset to want to talk about that. I want to talk about where we're going to live, where I can go fix me a hamburger,
Right.
but they don't think on those things. So it's really humbling experience for me. And I tell my girls, and I tell even kids in my classroom, how blessed you are to be able to do that, because some teenagers and they go right to school with all these things going on, and they go right to school and try to live somewhat of a normal teenage life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Tristina, what about you? Experiences like that or stories that you want to share?
Well, especially when we talk about giving and getting,
Mm.
and I'm going to come from the parent aspect, because as a child, there was trauma in my home, and I think I was 15 or 16. I was asked to leave because my stepfather didn't want me there anymore.
Wow.
So I know the uncomfortable and uncertainty and not having security. So that's why I provide that for my children, right? And I shared a little bit on a post on Facebook. I think, if you ever look at my post and you think, oh, she's just showing how perfect her life is. No, what I'm showing you is the healing process for
Mm.
me. That is not that my parents couldn't give it for whatever reason, it just wasn't there, but it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And not only for my own children, but for the kids that became my children when I was teaching. They need to see that a mom can be intentional, that a parent can put them first. And those are the things, like, when I would get a note from a student, Miss Jones, I'm going to run away, or no one loves me, no one wants me, I will pull them close. I'd pick them
Mhm.
up on the weekend and they would go out to lunch with my daughter. And so I have taken those moments in my journey and used them for something better,
Mm-hmm.
so that others can see that it's possible. And if we look around us, like Bridget shared, with those children, how do you even remotely know what normal, if there's a such thing, or, I want this, and then you can keep showing up to life if they don't have some of the basic necessities. And these are our children, right? The youngest in our society. And I just feel like there's a lot of work to be done, and it's healing for me. It's encouragement for me, because I realize that no matter what my journey may have been, there is something I can do to change that narrative, not
Mm.
just for me, but for others.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a parent will see, hey, I can, show up different with my kids, and maybe a kid, because what I've learned, that some of my students, they follow me on Facebook. And so
Mhm.
those same kids that had challenges and struggles, there was something that connected them to me and me to them in that classroom, but now it is extended. And so I'll go through my follow list and I'll see their names on there. They don't always comment. And so that's why I give back, or that's why I give the way that I give out toward our youth, our children, because my experience as a child and a youth, it was not always pleasant. And so I serve intentionally in that area for that very reason. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to say this because you kind of prompt me to think about social media, and you
Yeah.
said people may say, "Oh, she's just trying to show how perfect your life is." I want to say this: the people that are listening, come close. A lot of times, we are what we're doing is we're a platform for how good God is. I don't care what anybody say about my posts. I'm never
Right.
trying to brag.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to show women, especially women
Yeah.
with children, women who have been single parents, women that have come up as a teenager that just didn't have any self-esteem, they had low self-esteem, didn't have any confidence in what they can do. women that have given up. I'm
Yeah.
50 years old and I haven't did any of these things I said I was going to do, and I probably gonna never be able to do it. I am that person. I believe and this is not a pat on the back. This is real. This is real stuff right here. I
Yeah.
believe that God has chosen some people to show other people that it's possible. And I believe
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. And so I'm out there, a lot of people like, you be on there and used to be acting like everything's so good and you're this. And I'm like, no, I'm real transparent when something is bothering me. Now, I don't put my business out there, but you'll kind of get if I'm kind of like, okay, I feel like I need some support now. But
Yeah.
I have people that I go to for that. For the most part, I'm out there, and as well as you, Tracina, and as well as you, Brian, we're out there to show the world that this
Yeah.
is possible.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah.
look at me, and I'm not, I'm pretty animated. That's a good word. I'm pretty
Good word,
animated.
yeah. Animated.
So I do the most. I do. I'll be the first to say, but it's because I didn't always do the most, and I couldn't
Yeah.
Mhm.
always do the most, and I didn't always makes me want to cry. I didn't always think I could do the most.
Mm.
So that's why I'm like that. And that's why we show the world how our lives are now, because we want to show other people that it is possible.
It's possible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything is possible. No, thanks for sharing that, Bridget. So I want to now kind of throw the hand grenade on all of this,
Mm.
because one of the things that I think comes into play that brings about some fear and some discomfort for people, and that's
Mm.
the word vulnerability. Right.
Mm.
So that I think is the big one from a being a giver, getting
Yeah.
engaged, tuning in, whatever other term we want to use, some of the things we've already talked about. Because to do that at any level, yes, you do have to open yourself up. And so
Mhm.
that can be a little bit scary, that can be uncomfortable, but that's that thing where you have to make that decision of, is it worth it? What's
Yeah.
the give versus get? I am opening myself up. I have to be vulnerable to, let people in, to get closer, to get close to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what would you like to say about that was it easy for you to do? Did it take some work to get beyond that point of, okay, I know I'm being vulnerable and I have to open myself up, but initially, like, oh, nope, not doing it. And then it takes some time and you finally get there. How was that experience for you guys?
Well, for me, the vulnerability came in waves. Like it just sometimes I was very confident that this is what I was supposed to do, and then sometimes I would be like, "They heard me last time. They did this last time. They said this
Mhm.
last time." I mean, I just went. It was just in and out, and so I can't say that I've learned how to not feel that way, because it depends on the arena I'm in. Like I'm now moving into doing other things in my outreach and mentoring. And so I'm a little bit
Mhm.
insecure about that. And based on the past experiences, I'm still gonna go, but I'm really like my vulnerability is still on high alert, because I don't know how people are going to receive it, or they're going to take advantage of it, or what.
Yeah.
So it's in and out for me. But when it comes to working with my kids, and even like I just have no holds bar in terms of that. I don't feel vulnerable at all. Maybe because I feel like what I have to offer is so impactful.
Yeah.
Or what I have to offer, like I have it all. My stories are so impactful that I have no choice but to get it
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
So I don't
Got it.
feel that vulnerability, because I have no choice but
Mhm.
to get it out.
Got it. Tristina, what about you?
I just show up nervous
Mhm.
and vulnerable and just saying, okay, I'm here to serve. It doesn't
Mhm.
always come across like people don't always see that. They see the confidence, they see a strong woman, but I will tell you, I'm very vulnerable because, when you go through life, especially when your journey is of difficulty starts when you're young and you've been hurt and you've been injured, you can get to adulthood where you can make a logical decision and say, no, I'm not doing it. But I've chosen that it's okay to be vulnerable in the place where you serve and where you're showing up to give. But I want to be very transparent. I want to move it away from the service aspect, there's a part of my life. I'm a single woman. I'm very vulnerable about and afraid, if I'll be honest, of showing up again in a relationship,
Mhm.
right? Because I've been married and divorced twice. And so my heart, I don't know if it's open for that. Not marriage, but I don't know if it's just open for what all that takes place, because I heard someone years ago say, when you love, um, you give permission for people to hurt you, right? Not
Mm,
intentionally, not
mm,
maliciously, not in a manipulative way, but we're all imperfect, right? And so there's an aspect of us showing up in relationships where we're going to have to give of ourselves for the benefit of someone else. And
Mhm.
I did that, I believe, in a way that I should have in my marriages. And I don't know that my heart is ready to handle that or juggle that right now. So, in life and service, absolutely. You just show up vulnerable because that's what, you need to do. But in certain aspects of my life, I'm still treading lightly.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally get that. That's a key. And let me share, and then I want to come back to something I made a note on. So for me, even in starting this platform, and as Bridget was saying a little while ago, there's this inner thing that says I've got some things to share. Let's get it out there.
Mhm.
However, for me, from a vulnerability standpoint, I have never been a person that wanted to be in front of the camera. Well,
Yeah.
let me even back up. I didn't like to take even pictures. Damn, screw video. I mean, pictures were. I'll take pictures of people all day long, but it's like, wait, you want me to be in the picture? No, it's not me. So to work past that to get to this point where now it's like, all right, let's turn on the camera, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I bring that up to say, yeah, you do have to, as I say, rip off the band-aid, just
Yeah.
all right, and do it. And don't stop. I think that's the key. I think that's the key part of it. Because is it going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to be put yourself in places and situations where you would just not a happy camper, and you just, oh, just doesn't feel right. But don't let that deter you. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
You got to keep pushing. You have to push through it. And I made a couple little notes here, and it says, if you think back to when you were a child and you were first either learning to ride a bike or maybe just swim, and the anxiety that you had about
Mhm.
either of those things, right? And then obviously you fall or you swallow some water, right? One of the two. And then you're like, you panic and you do what you do, and you hurt and this, that, and the other thing. But what do
Yeah.
you do as a child? You go, you know what? I'm gonna ride that bike because every
Right.
one of my friends are riding bikes. I can't be
Yeah.
the one left behind. So you pick
Yeah.
yourself up and you go at it again and you fall again. And you go at it again and you fall again.
Mhm.
And before you know it, you're off and you're running, you're zipping around with your friends on your bike. So the whole concept there with what we're talking about today is, if this is not who you are, it's who you can be or who you can become. And understand
Mhm.
that. But the only way you're gonna get there is to start. And then
Mhm.
once you start, don't stop.
Going.
Just keep going. Accept the vulnerabilities of it. Be
Yeah.
open, be honest. And as Bridget brought up earlier, don't forget the self-care piece. Don't just give without also taking care of self, because that's also important. To
Right.
try to seek that balance. And that's why we started this talking about a balance sheet, because it's
Mhm.
never going to be
Mhm.
50-50, but it should never be 100% one way or the other either. Right. So it's both pieces to that. So I
Mhm.
want to bring this home. We've had, I think, great discussion. So I want to go into what we like to call final thoughts. What is it that you would like to share, just in general, about anything we've talked about today, or as a takeaway for our audience out there?
I'll say, like Tracina said, show up. My favorite motto: do it afraid, do it alone,
Mhm.
do it, apprehension, redo it, just do it. And so that's what I would do. I would say, and don't let your vulnerability stop you. Every time I do a girl talk, I am nervous. Every time. Every time I go into a shelter, I am nervous. Every time I'm sitting in my car thinking, I should have rescheduled this. Like I'm
Mhm.
nervous every time, and I feel vulnerable every time. And then as soon as 5 minutes into it, I forgot all about that, how I was feeling,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it starts to flow. So, get past the fear in the thinking, because we're our own worst enemy. Get past the thinking that you can't do it. Get past the vulnerability about what happened in your past and how people received you in your past. We
Yeah.
can't think about but learn from it. So just show up.
Mhm,
Just show
mhm.
up.
Just show up, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bridget, thanks for sharing. Christina, what about you?
I would say, when you show up as a giver, always remember that you're adding value, right? To
Mhm,
some aspect of either the space you're in or the people you're interacting with. And we're just at a place in our society where we need that, especially when you talk about mental health and you talk about, people who are unfortunately committing suicide. Somewhere they lost a sense of I'm not valued in this world. And so
mhm,
when you show up as a giver, you're adding value. And when you are, that is going to benefit you and the other person. While you
mhm,
don't show up to get anything, because you should never ever try to leverage a vantage point as a giver. But when you realize that you're giving value, you're adding something to those that you're serving or giving to, that there's a benefit of I'm just going to give. And you get on the back end the
Mm,
fulfillment of seeing a life change, the fulfillment of I was the person who could step in that moment when someone needed. And then the last thing I would definitely say as a giver, you have to be intentional in setting boundaries and
mhm,
mhm,
communicate them well. That this is the way that I'm going to show up. But at the moment that it starts to, creep up into your boundary where you've set, communicate what it is you can continue doing and what you want, and then be okay with your no being rock solid, that
right.
I've given all that I can. And all that's left for me to do now is just experience this space with you, just being here, not giving, not trying to get, but just showing up to be there in that space.
absolutely. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. So I want to jump back real quick to what Bridget was saying there about when you're nervous. It doesn't matter how many times you've done it, you show up and you're still kind of
Mhm.
nervous and uncomfortable and those kinds of things. And oddly enough, the popular people, the Denzel Washingtons of the world, the Oprah Winfrey's, Tyler
Mhm.
Perry's, all these kind of guys who live their life in front of a camera, and
Yeah.
they will tell you to this day that few minutes just before they have to walk out on the stage for whatever the reasons are,
Mhm.
they've got the butterflies and they've got this and so that's
Yeah.
normal. That's doesn't matter how big you get or where you start. That's the normal piece of the process. So for me, I want to just tie that back to say it doesn't matter where your level is or where you're starting, whether this is your first time saying, you know what, I really need to start out and try to get out and be more engaged, be more of a giver, or you've been doing it all your life and you still have that sense of discomfort that we're talking about right now, to remain open. And that's
Mhm,
that's that's the
Mhm.
key that I want to close with. And remaining open is two-sided. That's a two-way street. It's you're remaining open because you have to be vulnerable to give, but you also have to
Mhm.
be open to receive. And
Yeah.
that's the key component to it. That door, you can't have the door open to to have one thing happen and have it closed for the other. Either the door is open or the door is
Mhm.
closed. And I think that's the key part to bear in mind as you go down this, this pathway from this day forward. Just do your best to remain open, even though the vulnerability is there, the fears are there, how people may see you, and all of those things that come into play. Just be open to it, and
Mhm.
it can take you so many different places. You have so many great experiences, and just you right now, you don't even know what you don't know, but
mhm.
the opportunity is so grand and it's so great. So
Mhm.
that's the last thing that I'd like to share. So that's it for today, ladies. Thank you. Anybody else before we go? Something we'd like to say to the audience? Yes, no,
No.
good.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. This was a fabulous day. I think we all had some great things to share. Hopefully, we left some great nuggets with our audience out there. The next Ascent podcast will be July 15th. So we definitely look forward to having you join us then, and we'll continue our journey together. So until then, everyone have a safe weekend. Enjoy the 4th of July, which is coming up. So enjoy that. And we'll all talk very, very soon. Take care. Bye now.
Bye.